Ororon's early access is here, so it's time to theorycraft and see what teams he will be good in, as well as how to go about building him. But first, don't forget that I have made a new Discord server, and there is currently a giveaway for 2 Welkin Moons. You just need to be subscribed to the channel and join the server. Link will be in the description and the pinned comment. Now, you probably already know the basics of Ororon's kit by now, but just to make sure that we are all on the same page, I'll briefly summarize. Ororon is an AoE Electro sub DPS unit that can taunt enemies with his burst. He wants to be utilized in Electro-Charged teams, as this is required for his A1 passive, which is where most of his damage comes from. In addition to being an AoE sub DPS, Ororon is also a pretty good buffer, as he can use the scroll set and he can refund 9 energy to your on-fielder, as well as buff your on-fielder's attack by 30% as well if he's C6. Plus, he's a bow user, so if you have elegy for the end, he will be able to buff even farther. With that said, let's take a look at his teams. As mentioned, Ororon really wants Electro-Charged, so he's going to work best with Electro and Hydro units. One unit he's looking to be an excellent option for is Clarand, with a team of Clarand, Ororon, Farina, Kazuha. This team is great because Ororon provides great buffing to Clarand, while Farina at the same time gets the scroll buff as well. And on top of that buffing, the team has fantastic AoE damage. You have Ororon sub DPS damage, while Kazuha will also do good sub DPS damage with his swalls since he gets both Electro and Hydro, and when he gets Electro-Charged damage, it will hit pretty hard thanks to the reaction buffs coming in 5.2. Furthermore, Kazuha provides his grouping, so Clarand and Farina should be able to hit multiple enemies with most of their damage as well. One caveat to mention here is that this team is relying entirely on Clarant's self-healing as well as Farina's overheal procs for sustain, but this should be fine since you also have Ororon's burst taunting enemies, which can make avoiding getting hit easier, although keep in mind taunts don't work against Barsis. But overall, this is looking like it should be Clarent's new strongest team, being a decent amount stronger than all her other current teams. Keep in mind that if Ororon is not C6, the DPS of this team is higher with a C6 Fischl instead of him, but even then, Fischl's damage is single target while Ororon's is AoE, so he'll likely perform better than her even then. Now, another unit that can make use of the Farina Ororon Kazuha core is Nuvolette. Nuvolette and Clarant are the main units that will be able to do this, as they have very good self-healing to allow them to not need a dedicated healer on the team. With Nuvolette, this team has all the same benefits that it does for Clarant, good buffing from Ororon, on top of the good AoE sub-DPS damage between Ororon, Kazuha, and Electro-Charged. Using Ororon on Nuvolette's team is actually equivalent DPS to using a C0 Shilonin, which is absolutely insane considering how much she does for him. Although keep in mind that Niblette and Farina both do lower personal damage with Ororon than with Shilonin, so the more investment you have, the better Shilonin will be in comparison. But Ororon is by far the best option for playing Niblette without Shilonin, and you don't even need Ororon to be C6 here, as his C6 doesn't buff Niblette to begin with. Another unit I believe Ororon should be best in slot with is Cyno. The team here would be Cyno, Baizu, Ororon, Farina, so it's Quick Bloom with Ororon replacing Nahida. The idea here is that Ororon's buffing and sub DPS damage are good enough to compensate for losing Nahida's, while not having Nahida also means freeing Cyno from all those practical issues that come with her, such as multi-wave and super long rotation setups. Plus, with double Electro, you will pretty much never run into energy issues on Cyno, especially with Ororon refunding 9 energy to him. You will lose Quicken uptime with Baisu as the only source of Dendro, especially if you need to extend your rotation, but while Quicken is down, you will have Electro-Charged damage, which should somewhat make up for any lost aggravates, especially if Cyno owns the Electro-Charged damage, which he should most of the time since he has the fastest application on the team. Also, one thing to be aware of with this team is that, since Sino doesn't have any energy issues here, you don't need to use him on Thundering Fury like you do in Double Dendro. You can get away with using Gilded Dreams instead, although Thundering Fury is still good if you want to use it. DPS wise, this team is actually equivalent to a C0 Nahida, while again not having any of the practical issues that Sino has with her. And if you happen to have Elegy for the end on Ororon, then it will be higher DPS than Nahida, so Ororon does seem to be just straight up better than Nahida for Sino. Unfortunately, Ororon isn't by any means like a big upgrade in the actual damage and DPS, but being equal DPS to Nahida while fixing all of the practical issues should be a major improvement. Now there's one last unit that I think Ororon is absolutely best in slot with, and that is Chaska. While Chaska is neither Hydro nor Electro, Ororon's A1 seems to work with Hydro or Electro units from any unit on the team excluding himself, even if they are off-field, so Freena's Hydro damage will work. Since Chaska really wants to have a full rainbow team, there aren't many great options she can use for buffers other than Bennett and Farina, but Ororon, the damage bonus and attack percent he provides, works fantastic. And he is by far the highest damage option for her fourth slot. Even if you don't have him C6, he's still going to be the best. His energy refund can also help Chaska burst every rotation, but keep in mind you will need around 135 to 150% energy recharge on her, even with Ororon on the team. And that covers all of the teams that I think are worth mentioning for Ororon. I did look into some other teams, such as Ayato, Kokomi, Sethos, and Sucrose Taser teams, but they were just way too weak to even be worth mentioning. With that said, let's go over how to build Ororon. For his artifacts, there's no reason to use any set on Ororon other than Scroll. It is the best set for his own personal damage while providing huge buffs to the entire team. Using him on anything else is trolling. For the main stats, you'll want Attack Sands, Electro or Attack Goblet, and a Crit Circlet. Electro is always better than Attack Goblet, but because he gets a high amount of damage bonus between Scroll, his C1 and C2, supports he's likely to be used with such as Farina and Kazuha, also likely getting some from his weapon, Attack Goblet is not far behind Electro. And for his main stats, this is also very straightforward. Prioritize crit, then attack, and also make sure to get enough energy to burst every rotation if you need it on your team. And speaking of energy, for his energy requirements, in a solo Electro team, you can expect to need between 140 to 170% as solo Electro, and you shouldn't need any more than 120% at most in double Electro teams, and may not need any at all. The 140 to 170% ER he will need in solo Electro can be met easily by using Elegy for the end, which is going to be his best weapon for overall team damage and almost all of his teams due to the extra buffing it provides. If you don't have Elegy, Favonius will be a good weapon option for Ororon, as it will fully cover his energy requirements while also lowering the requirements for the whole team, which is likely to result in more overall team damage than using a better weapon for his own personal damage. But for teams where you don't need the energy from Favonius and you don't have Elegy, just use the best stat stick bow that you have for Ororon. Good options include the First Great Magic, Aqua Simulacra, Skyward Harp, Polar Star, as well as Song of Stillness and Alley Hunter for 4-star options. Lastly, Ororon's constellations. His biggest are his C6, C4, C1, and C2. C6 gives him that 30% attack buff to your main DPS, so it's going to be very good for the overall team damage. C4 lowers his energy requirements by a good chunk, so that's a good increase to his personal damage. And C1 and C2 both give him good amounts of damage bonus, so they are also pretty good for his personal damage. Overall, he gets about a 50% increase to his personal damage from C0 to C6, but remember that a lot of his value comes from buffing through the scroll set, so he'll be good even at low constellations. I would recommend trying to get him to at least C2, then aim to get him to C6 over time as he reruns, if you can't go for it this banner. And that covers pretty much everything. Overall, Ororon is looking to be really good for a 4-star unit. He should be best in slot with Nuvalet, Chaska, Clarent Taser, and Sino Quickbloom. That's not exactly a lot of teams, but I'd rather have a unit that is strong in a few teams than one that's just okay in many, and these are very strong teams that he is good in. If you play any of the mentioned DPS units, it's definitely not a bad idea to pick up a few copies of Ororon while he is on banner, if you have sufficient savings. And if you liked today's video, please be sure to give a like and subscribe and comment your thoughts down below. And don't forget to also join the Discord server, link below. Thanks, goodbye.